Hey everyone, Ebo here. Today, we're going to go over how to use Tabletop Simulator to play Disney Lorcana. Let's start by launching Tabletop Simulator. And before we jump into the action, let's take a look at some settings that will improve your playing experience. To open the settings, we'll click this gear icon. Then let's click on the Interface tab. If needed, you can adjust the scale to fit the size of your screen or your setup. I'm also a big fan of setting the theme to a dark mode. By default, it'll be light. You can just click dark to set it. We'll close out of there. Now let's click on this miscellaneous settings button. Here, I'd recommend unchecking hand view. And then we can ignore most of these settings. We'll scroll most of the way down. Until we find this mouse shake threshold. I recommend setting this all the way down to 0. Scroll down a little more. And make sure card is a deck for hotkeys, hand component hotkey draw, and keyboard single digit by default are all enabled. Then we can close this by clicking the red X in the top right. Make sure we apply these settings before closing out. We'll click apply, and then the red X here. Now that our settings are taken care of, let's create a table. We'll click on single player for now. This window will look mostly blank if you're newer to Tabletop Simulator. Let's click on this blue workshop button, and then we'll click on browse. This will open up the Steam Workshop page for Tabletop Simulator. Let's use this search box. We're going to type in Lorcana and then press enter. We're looking for the Lorcana TCG scripted 1v1 table. Go ahead and click on that. Now, if you aren't already subscribed, this button will say subscribe. You can always click this here to either subscribe or unsubscribe at any time. Once it does say subscribed, let's close out of this. And we'll go back to our table. Now we should see this Lorcana scripted 1v1 table in our workshop tab. Go ahead and click on it, and then click on load. The table might take a few moments to load up the first time. Once everything has loaded, you'll notice there's no cards on the table. This is intentional. I have worked with the creators of a few fan sites to create the ability to import saved decks from their sites. At the top right of the screen, click on the black and white icon that looks like a deck list. This will bring up the Lorcana deck importer. Here, you can paste the deck code or the entire web link to your saved deck. You can also link to a custom image for your card back if desired. It will default to the official Lorcana card back if left blank. Additionally, I have worked with Dreamborn specifically to support additional languages, such as French, German, or Italian. If you are using Dreamborn, you can click the accompanying flag to set the desired language. I'll paste in the link to one of my saved decks here, and then simply click Import Deck. This process may take a few moments, as a web request is sent to that website, and then this mod uses the return data to build the deck and encode the cards for automation. If you would prefer to use a starter deck, let's open the Lorcana deck importer again. But this time, we'll click the image at the top of the window. This will bring up a list of every official starter deck or pre-constructed deck in Lorcana. You can use the scroll bar to the right to scroll up or down this list. When you have found the deck you would like to use, simply click on its image, and it will automatically load that deck from Dreamborn. If you would like to adjust your playmat, click the Lorcana symbol on the top right of the screen. Again, we can use the scroll bar to the right to scroll through the list. Click the image you would like to use, or at the very bottom, you can paste a link to a custom image if you'd prefer. Just be sure to resize the image to the size listed here, and also make sure your image is in the RGB color format. So now that we have our deck loaded and our playmat set, let's go over some of the controls and included tools. To pan the camera, we can use W, A, S, D. We can zoom in or out by using the mouse scroll wheel. We can rotate either using the arrow keys or by holding right click and moving the mouse around. Lastly, we can reset our view by pressing spacebar. To draw your opening hand, click this button below your discard pile. This will automatically shuffle your deck, then deal you 7 cards. Any cards you would like to mulligan away, simply pull them back to your second hand zone. Then, click the Mulligan Cards button below your discard pile. This will complete the mulligan action for you. If you ever need to zoom in on a card or object to more clearly see it, hover over the card, then hold the Alt key. While holding Alt, you can use your mouse scroll wheel to further zoom in or out. You can also rotate this preview by pressing E or Q on your keyboard. You can flip over an object by hovering over it and pressing F for flip. As we learned a moment ago, you can press E or Q to rotate an object. For this game, I would highly recommend setting your rotation degrees to 90. You can adjust this by clicking this degrees rotation symbol on the top right of the screen. To put a card back into your hand, you can simply click and hold it and drag it back to your hand. Or alternatively, you can hover over it and press a number key on your number row to draw that card back to your hand. To group cards together, you can either box select them or hold Control and click each card individually. Once you have your cards selected, you can press G to group them together. Alternatively, before pressing G, you can mouse over an existing object. This will cause the cards to group onto that object. This can be useful for quickly moving cards to your discard pile. If you ever need to shuffle a deck or roll a die, you can hover over that object and press R for randomize. To search a deck, right-click it and select Search. There's a search box at the top as well that you can type into to more easily find specific cards. We can draw a line to point to things by pressing and holding Tab, then moving our mouse cursor. We can ping anywhere on the field by pressing Tab. If we press Tab while hovering over a card, we'll see a chat message appear, and the card will be highlighted for a few seconds. To delete an object, we can hover over it and press either the backspace key or delete key on our keyboard. Only the host or promoted player may delete objects. To reset your side of the table, click the Reset Deck button. Let's do that now. This table has a lot of custom scripting to help make playing as smooth and fast as possible, while still getting the feel of playing in person. Let's open the notebook at the top of the screen to read over some of these features. To start, we can see some chat commands listed. To type in Tabletop Simulator, press Enter, type in your message, then press Enter again. Let's try one of these chat commands now. We'll type !lip, and then press Enter. We'll see a broadcast across the top of the screen with the result, which is also printed in our chat box below. The !player command is especially helpful in determining the starting player. Looking a bit further down, there's a list of scripting keys. By default, Tabletop Simulator binds these to your number pad. You can change this binding by clicking on Menu, Configuration, Controls, and then scrolling all the way down. You should see scripting 1 through 10 as your available options to change. Let's walk through some of these scripting keys. We can press numpad 1 to draw a card. You'll notice that there is a chat message in the bottom corner saying that a player has drawn a card, and that will coincide with the player who pressed that scripting key. If we press numpad 2, we'll move cards from our first hand zone to our second hand zone. If we have any exerted cards on our playmat, we can press numpad 3 to automatically ready them. Pressing numpad 4 will move any selected or hovered cards to our discard pile. Additionally, if you have any dice or tokens in play, numpad 4 will destroy those. Numpad 5 will move any cards from our second hand zone back to our first hand zone. If we hover or select a character and then press numpad 6, it will automatically quest and add the appropriate amount of lore to your lore counter. This action does take plus and minus lore dice on top of the card into account. This works for locations that have printed lore on them as well. We can also right-click on characters or locations with lore and select quest or gain lore, respectively. Numpad 7 will move selected cards to the bottom of our deck. Numpad 8 will randomly discard a card out of our hand. Numpad 9 will place selected cards on the top of our deck. And lastly, scripting 10, which is numpad 0, can be used to automate the inking action. This does respect the inkability of a card and prints a message in chat. If you want to ink a card without the inkability check or sharing the card's name, simply flip the card face down by pressing F, then try inking it. You can also right-click a card and select Ink instead of pressing numpad 0. You may have noticed an ink will counter to the left of your playmat. The top number is how much ready ink you have available, while the bottom number is the total number of ink in your inkwell. Every face-down card that is placed in this lower section of your playmat is automatically taken into account. Also, all of those cards are tagged in a way to prevent them from stacking on top of each other. Just above the inkwell counter, there is a hand counter. This displays how many cards are in each of our hand zones. Let's draw a few cards to check that now. Just above that, there are a large amount of tokens at your disposal. The Can't Ready, Can't Quest, and Reckless tokens are scripted, as are the plus and minus lore dice. You can quickly set a value on a die by hovering over it and pressing a number key. You can also use Q or E to increment or decrement the value as well. At the top right of your playmat, you'll see a lore counter. This value automatically increases or decreases when using the scripting questing feature. You can manually increase or decrease this value using the +1 and -1 buttons. Or you can click into the center and type whatever value you would like. Next to your deck and discard zones, there are two other tools. The first one is a button to automatically ink the top card of your deck. The one under it is the Scry tool. which is useful for automating effects that have you look at a certain number of cards from the top of your deck. As an example, let's say we play an aerial spectacular singer. To resolve her effect, you would click on the number 4 under the tool. This would move 8 cards in our hand to our second hand zone, and then draw 4 cards. If there's a song among them, we would pull that card out to reveal to our opponent, and then we'd put it back into our second hand zone since we're going to keep it. To the right of the tool, we'll see a return top or return bottom button. Since we want these cards to go onto the bottom of the deck, we will click on return bottom. You'll notice the tooltip here tells us that the rightmost card will be the very bottom card, so we can rearrange our hand before pressing the button if we wish. And that covers the basics of what the table has to offer. There are a few other features, such as a button over here to toggle the quick start rules. And there's a UI button at the top to load some special puzzle challenges for a bit of fun. Let's go back to the main menu for now. To host a table that other players can join, click Create, then select Multiplayer. Here we can give our table a name. We can set it to be either public or private, and we can set a password if we'd like. Additionally, we can set how many players can join the table. This can be useful if you'd like to allow spectators or a table judge. Once we click Create, we can load our desired mod or save. If you'd like to join another player's table, you can either click Menu and Server Browser, or back to the main menu and click Join. We can use any of these column headers to filter through the results. I'd recommend using the search bar at the top of the screen here. You can search for either the name of the game, the host name, or the server name. We'll type in Lorcana and see how many games are running currently. Once you have found the game you'd like to join, click on the table, and then you would click Connect. If the table requires a password, it will bring up a prompt asking for that password now. Once you are loaded into that table, you'll need to click the teal or white cube to sit at the appropriate color. Now let's talk about some occasional issues you may run into. If the buttons on the table are warped and stretch across the screen, have the host load the game again by clicking Games and just reloading the save or the workshop mod. That'll fix it for both players. If you're trying to import a deck and you get an error message, make sure you're loading the entire web link or just that specific deck code at the end of the web link. If you are specifically getting a JSON error using Dreamborn specifically, it means something on your network or something on Dreamborn's side is blocking that connection. We see this occasionally when it pulls up the bot challenge page due to a shared connection or using a VPN server. You can always try a different service such as Lorcana.com or Inkborn.app instead of using Dreamborn specifically. If your camera starts behaving weirdly, you may want to check to see if your camera mode has been changed. You can cycle through these by pressing P. Ideally, you'll want to be in third-person camera, and then press spacebar to reset your camera view. If you run into any other issues, feel free to leave a message on the Steam Workshop page for this mod, or you can contact me directly. My information can be found in the notebook under the Links and Info section. In the description of this video, I'll put a link to a Discord server that can be used for finding players. Until next time, thanks for watching.